I think we can call this meeting to order. We have a quorum. We have as the first item our minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
We started, sorry. We have Pat moving the minutes and Bill seconding them. All in favor? The next item is the approval of the disbursements. Are there any questions on the disbursements? It is the first month of the year, so they're rather limited in what they say. Steve, would you like to comment on any of the items before we take action?
I would just say that some of the ones that we've talked about in the past that have been delayed are making great pains, I think, in catching up. They're not completely paid in full yet, but that they are making great efforts and strides in so doing.
When is the last time that we can accept their payment and have it go back to the last fiscal year? Is that in September or is that later?
I actually think that has passed. I think it's usually in, it's not too far out of July that can be retro. I can find out for sure. But
I thought it was similar to bills. If
I
it's
don't think
accrued in
that's
the last year, you
true.
can put it back in for about 3 months.
Yeah, it hasn't been my experience. but,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. Well, we'll see that right at when we have the very close of the books of
Yes,
last year's
and-
fiscal year, which will be when, in September or October?
Yeah, I think it's probably more into October, but I think what we'll see, what I'm preparing you for, and what I've thought all along here is that we're going to have a situation where we're, pretty, missing the mark on the fiscal year 19 by a lot, missing the target, but going to be over the target or well on the bullseye, so to speak, for 2020 because of that very cutoff point. And so it's going to be, a big deep breath, and then we'll see it coming in. I'm already starting to see some of that happen.
Is there a motion to approve the disbursements?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, they're approved. All right, we're down to leases. Did you want to sit there and do it, or you want to come up to the?
Gotta get my steps in today. So, is this hot? I can never tell. Am I okay? So the first lease for consideration at next month's meeting, this is your first look at it, is for Front Street Brewery, the tap room at the Freight House. This is not their entire lease. We have a lease with them for the tap room, and then a couple years ago, on a year-to-year basis, they added the additional adjacent space, which now they are converting into their main tap room. But they next year at this time is when the primary lease, I'll call it, comes up, because it was a 3-year. And so what you have before you this evening is the final single year of the adjacent space, so that next year at this time we can blend it into the overall lease. And then going forward, it would be ostensibly a 3-year lease altogether. Okay, so you have the last year of what we call the addendum in your packet for official action next month's meeting. Any questions on that?
Bill, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the Front Street Brewery total for the calendar year is $37,000 or something.
If you're reading off, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, and then, so now you're gonna add some more space, and that says it's gonna be 19,000 if I remember.
Nope, that's already noted. This isn't anything new. This is a renewal of this additional space. So what numbers you're referencing off of the revenue chart are going to remain the same, essentially. because this is a renewal of an existing
The
space that they're
difference
already
is-
paying for.
Bill, they would like that space now permanently. They're moving in. It's not just a storage. It's not just we're feeling it out and using it and paying for it. We're making it part of our operation, right? So when we see it, we will see it all in one lease next year.
And then if you so choose, I'll continue with item B under leases, the Visit Quad Cities Visitor Center at Union Station. Just a couple small items. You approved this at the last month's meeting. Tonight, what I'm asking for is reapproval, if you will, just because we changed a couple of the dates. We have some work going on in there. We're under bid for right now, okay, the interior restoration from some of the flooding. And we just added a little bit more time. Now, I probably could have exercised that on my own. I think you would have entrusted me to do that. But that, along with adding a clause that Visit Quad Cities wanted, item number 15, kind of a force majeure, which is a little superfluous, but we went ahead and added it. We already know that when there's a natural event, for example, flooding, that we abate that rent for the time period that folks are not inside, which is essentially what item 15 is also speaking to. But while we needed to change a date and a signatory anyway, I decided to bring it back before you and add that clause as well. So tonight, we're looking for approval of this item.
Any questions?
Yeah, so is item 15 on this particular lease the only one of this wording or nature that we have in our leases? Of all of our leases along the riverfront, or is this one unique, or?
I would have to check all of them. There have been times where we've had this language. I don't know right now if to answer your question directly, I don't know how many we might still have, but I did vet it through legal and they were fine with it, so.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the amended lease?
I'll make a motion to approve.
A second?
Second.
Got it. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, it is approved.
Okay, the third and final lease for your consideration and action this evening is Langman Construction working with the city for a staging area. This is an area along West River Drive, about 1,000 feet or so, or in the unimproved area next to Marquette. So you have a surface parking lot, but about 1,000 feet to the west, there's sort of a graveled area right along West River Drive. That is what is contemplated in this agreement. The city, Langman is a contractor for the city working on the 1930s sanitary sewer interceptor project. Fancy word here, but it will take a couple seasons. It's a mammoth project, and they need a staging area for sort of the concrete manipulation, for lack of a better term. And so that is why, since it's a city project, that you see the $1 a year rent. I'll just mention that on the onset because this is work for the city in need of a place for it to be done. And this works very well and conveniently for this particular project location. Are there any questions about it? You see it on the map at the end of the draft lease.
Bill has a question.
Yes.
That's, I went down there, that's the piece of land immediately to the west of where Connolly had that fenced area.
Yes.
The only question I got is about that area. What happened to the fence? When did the fence disappear?
Maybe 2 seasons ago, we took that down. Yep.
I move approval.
Wait a minute. I think we have another question. I have one.
Yes.
I'm going to be Carl Romberg for the night. It has Tom signing this. The city attorney.
So let's scratch that since it's coming through here, and we'll approve it based on the chair's signature.
Right. And so in terms of all the language, the Riverfront Commission
Yep.
is the city of Davenport. It exchanges language in here. All right.
That is the first line references that, but
You read the rest
we
of it.
need
You,
a signatory.
you
Yep.
wouldn't have known.
Why is civil signing it?
Sorry.
Is it,
Civil signing it.
where's Langman?
They didn't. That's also an error.
It should be Langman
Should be
instead of
Langman.
Civil.
They didn't cut and paste that.
Okay.
correctly. Yep.
So,
We'll change both signatories, but
yeah.
it'll be approved
Let's-
as.
Well,
Let's
you
have
might
a
be,
motion.
you might be right. Civil might be the general and Langman the sub.
I'll find out, but signatories will be accurate in both ways. Yep.
Is there a motion to approve it as changed?
So move.
A second?
Sec-
I will also just let you know that you
All those in favor? Aye. Okay.
I would be remiss if I didn't point out that we will ensure compliance. You know, there's language in here talking about the area's return, to its existing or better. We will make sure that there's language in there that the commission is represented in what that is, so that at least your representative through me has the ability to go on site and say, yes, the commission says that this is how it should look or how it did look. We'll take pictures now. I can't imagine it worsening, but it will briefly, right? I mean, for certain hard use. So, okay. I'm just going to continue
Go on.
to stay up here. Under projects, you all asked me at the last meeting to return to you this month with what I have included on the next page in the packet. I will say that through a great deal of research, we had a hard time identifying bylaws that actually formalize the practice of officer succession protocol. So what I'm proposing to you through a couple of these items, and there could even be variances in any of these, is in all likelihood to use customary practice instead of formalizing it through your bylaws. That seems to be a consistent way to handle some things. But let's get into it a little bit, and then you all can sort of have a discussion about how you'd like to proceed. So the first item, just to give you a flavor for what we're talking about here, the ultimate goal that you identified at the last meeting was to try to have some continuity. You all have 6-year terms, and when officers are elected, on an annual basis, you do take the chance that you've got leadership that is possibly either incongruent or at least has little consistency for the entire group. Okay, and so the first option would be to consider language that would be approved and placed in the minutes that would say officers will be elected annually, as it is in July, by the full commission with the expectation of a 4-year succession plan as customary practice. The position of vice chairmanship will comprise the first and second years, then the chairmanship in years 3 and 4. So there you see that you've got, 2 with the chairmanship or vice chair, and then 2 for the chairmanship. The second one is the same, except for it takes that into a 2-year, where you've got each year of the 2-year plan, one being the chairmanship, and then the second year of that, the chairmanship. So instead of 2 years each position, you've got single year of each position, okay? Then, number 3, officers will be elected annually by the full commission with the expectation of a 4-year succession plan as customary practice. The position of secretary will comprise the first year, then vice chairmanship in the second year, and then finally the chairmanship in years 3 and 4. So you can see we added in a position, but it's still a 4-year plan. And then item 4, similarly, officers will be elected annually by the full commission with the expectation of a 3-year succession plan. The position of secretary will comprise the first year, vice chairmanship the second, and finally chairmanship in the third. And then I added 5 for if you wanted to make an adjustment to the bylaws. Right now, there is a clause that talks about annual officer elections. Our bylaws discuss that for happening at our July meeting. This bylaw change could say the election of officers will occur at the July meeting every 2 years. So if you're looking for, officers to hold the position for more than a single year with the chance of that changing every year, then you could make that change. So that's kind of what I tried to boil it down to after finding a number of, didn't find a number of formalized groups, looked through a lot of not-for-profits and found that if any do it, it's their customary practice, not written in their bylaws. So I didn't have any language to borrow from. So open it up for your discussion. You all don't have to act on it tonight either, but I would mind kind of learning from you what you're thinking.
So, who would like to go first? Oh, come on, light up the sky here for me. Well, I think I'll just be kind of negative here. I don't think number 3 works. It won't work. That means like a vice chair goes out of place or something. It just doesn't, you can't hold and then have those other ones just for a year. So that one, mathematically, it doesn't work. So that leaves us with the other options, which I think maybe I would like, Pat, you kind of to talk about your vision, because you were the one that said, I've had this for a couple of years and I think it should be something else.
Yeah, this doesn't read the way I was thinking, no. I'm not sure. I sympathize with you if you couldn't find any kind of language that fits it, but yeah, this isn't what I had in mind. I don't know. I guess I'm not sure exactly how it should read.
So what do you
But-
have? I mean, maybe if you tell us what you had in mind, we can then figure out where to go.
Well, I mean, first goal is to limit the chairmanship so that one person isn't in a very long time. I think that's usually harmful for a commission. The second thing I just thought by having it understood the vice chair would become the chair, there would be a easy succession plan there, make it smoother. Now maybe this 5th thing starts to get there by having it, instead of electing officials every year, we elect them every 2 years. I mean, that, I guess, I don't know, it'd be customary or stated that the chairman doesn't run for a re-election after 2 years. I don't know.
Okay, so let's look at the first one, and maybe it's the way it's worded. It basically does say that the chair would only be chair for 2 years, the way it's written. And maybe I'm trying to read into what you were trying to do. Steve, were you trying to say, hey, if you're going to accept this role of vice chair, there's an indication that you will stay with it for 4 years.
Year 1 and 2 as vice, and then 3 and 4 as chair.
Right.
That's correct.
And given that we have 6-year terms, I mean, it can't be for sure that that's going to happen, but it's kind of pointing the finger of the person who's willing to be vice chair that they see their role as taking that over.
Right.
So maybe we could discuss around that.
So, Steve, thanks for putting these together. I can sympathize how difficult it is to just create language like this. So I'd be more than happy to take what Steve started and try and add to it or create some additional language. I think having the chairmanship or vice chairmanship be the succession and also the two positions that have these term limits essentially is good. I think those are people that you expect to stay in the community and be here for a while. Regardless whether we do the customary practice or the bylaw revisions, we'll need some type of language accounting for someone that leaves for whatever reason. That's pretty simple. I think I can work something up like that. And then what else was I thinking? Yeah, we can also do it. I mean, we can put in term limits. We can say, the chair shall not serve for a period longer than 2 years or something like that. So, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is if you would like for me to take a swing at this, I'd be happy to and see if I can take what the great start that Steve has and improve on it.
Randall, did you were on.
I was just gonna say, following up with what Ryan said too, that I think would recommend that just to take what you had provided, which in its governance glory, and have him rewrite it to maybe what we had in mind. I think that's fine.
Great.
Well, first, as I'm thinking this, first I think we got to reach agreement that maybe everybody's that we do want term limits. I mean, maybe everybody's not in agreement on that. Maybe people have a stronger feeling that somebody should serve more than 2 years if they're doing a good job and want to stay. I guess we shouldn't start out with the assumption just because I suggested it doesn't mean that's where we should go. Maybe we need to make that clear that we do want term limits.
Yeah, I think maybe we could agree, and maybe we can or cannot, but I think number 5 there, do we all agree that, say in July, that we will have elections every 2 years? So that's the first part. And then is it a consensus that we think that the vice chair will eventually become the chairman? I mean, that seems to be a fairly common theme that's going on here. And then the question is it a 2-year period for each of those offices? So I think if we can agree upon that, our progression should be easy to write out. If you're willing to do that, then it seems to me that that's really all we're talking about here. The progression of the vice chair to the chairman, and is it a 2-year period for each of those? And then we take into number 5 that in July we're going to, well, we already passed that, but it's going to be a 2-year period we vote. I mean, that seems to me a fairly simple thing.
Well, and then if I could just add, if we're going to revise through number 5 to the bylaws, is it your wish to incorporate this into the bylaws or have that be a split between the 2 years and then just the succession planning as customary practice? That becomes a question.
I'm curious for Pat. So just for my own reference, how long were you chair for? And did you think that amount of time was excessive, or did you find it to be manageable?
The mayor had been chair for the first 100 years of the, so I was the
Di-
first.
different mayors.
So I was the first non-mayor.
Okay.
So we never needed to have any kind of this in place. So
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 how
I
long
was
were-
I
were
was
you,
about
2
2 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was about 2 years.
And did you find it easy to be kind of effective during that time, or that you kind of learned as you went along, or it was beneficial to be in it for longer than a year, or do you?
I think you have to be in it longer than a year. Yes, and I've been on other commissions, and most of them have had term limits of 2 years,
Okay.
1 or 2 years, and I've always been comfortable in those other groups with that. And so I just thought that's what I would do, is step down after 2 years.
Okay.
Maybe I'll throw in my 2 cents. One, I'm not really big on wanting to do a bylaws change, and I think maybe electing annually, because again, we all have 6-year terms, and things can seriously change in 2 years, that you might not even have someone to be in the vice chair role. I think what Pat was trying to get at is more of a customary practice, that there is this expectation, and I've been on boards like this, that you would serve for 2 years. And there is an expectation that when you get to the higher ranks of your officers, that you would stay and be a leader. I mean, that's what and so I think that's what we're trying to say. If you accept those positions, those are leadership positions, and your intent, your best intent, because that's all you can give, is that you would be in those positions. And it seems that 2 years would work. That 4 years, you have a 6-year term, there's a good possibility that you will be there that whole entire time. Again, you don't know if you're going to be reappointed. And so you could be chair and your term is up, and that alderman would like to go in a different direction. And so that would be a change that we would have to, accommodate. That's why I don't think this 2-year voting every 2 years. I think we'll end up being predictable, but we can't predict elections and people and who are in those positions.
It creates a
right?
vacancy. Yeah.
So I think that it would be too much to go to the bylaws. So I'm kind of leaning towards one with that workup that Ryan is talking about, like if somebody leaves, what do you do? Because would we have elections? If the chair left, we'd have election, right? Whenever that next month election would be.
But it may be, not to get into the weeds too much yet, but it may be that the
Your
person
full term.
interested may only have, a couple, 2 years on their term instead of 4, right? And so, it's hard to write for that,
Yeah,
but I think if it's customary practice, we're able to at least account for it, through
It would
some
be
language.
something that like maybe we would have the writing, and as a commission we would just approve as a customary practice. So it's kind of an expectation at this point. All right, so I got Ryan again.
So I appreciate what you're saying, Dee. I agree bylaw changes are a little more extreme. I think we can also look at it as, those positions don't have to stay vacant. If someone leaves for whatever reason, the commission can fill that position, and the new individual will finish that term. So they'll step into that person's shoes, just like now. If the president dies, the vice president steps up and finishes just that term and then has to be reelected. So if we did the 2-year terms, we could still have that succession built in where it's not sitting empty for that period of time. But I'll come in with different options, and we can look at them next time.
I agree with you, Dee. I would not change the bylaws, but I think there needs to be a clear write-up of a customary practice.
Good. Yeah.
Let Ryan take a shot at it and give it to you so we can get it out in next month's packet. I love when somebody takes homework home. That's great.
Thank you.
It's not Steve, right?
Okay. You want me to continue on, Dee? Okay. Item B under projects, the Freight House Mural Project. You might remember, I included a couple pictures in your packet, but about 4 years ago, and for some of the new folks There was a really great partnership that the Riverfront Improvement Commission undertook with Quad City Arts and some teen artists during the summer. And we did along the north side of the Freight House about 5 murals on the doors north facing all along there. And due to funding availability, sort of just stopped with that at that point. And here we are 4 years later, and I reached out to Quad City Arts because I think it's time to finish that project. And there's about 4 doors to do, and so splitting some costs with them, they are prepared this fall with a cohort. Late September would extend probably into mid-October to finish those, and we don't have a design, but they would be thematically connected to the existing ones, which were meant to be connected to the tenancy of the building, so they're produce and, that kind of thing, fresh, local, marketplace kinds of attributes. And so this is contemplated by me in the budget for this year, and so we're looking at about $5,000 that we would be paying for this to be done in working with Quad City Arts and this particular project initiative. So I just wanted you to all be aware and supportive of that, I guess, if you so choose to make that a motion.
You have
That
any
would be great.
questions of Steve? Have a motion by anyone?
Make a motion that we approve the,
Mural
do you want
project.
a dollar amount, or no, you want it vague for the
Mural
dollar?
project, I think is
So
fine.
just,
You could say not to exceed 5,000
Oh, we don't have to, well,
if you want.
we'll leave the dollar amount out.
Okay.
And just
Okay.
motion to,
Second to that one? So it would be approving the mural project.
So upon, the way this works, this, here in another month or so, we should receive, what they do is that they assemble before the painting, and they kind of sit around a table and brainstorm and design, and as they finalize that, I receive that, which then I will send out to you all, so like I'm not the only one looking at these before they get painted. But if you look at the ones that were done 4 years ago, they're awesome, and my expectation is they'll be equally awesome. They are also all illuminated, and so they don't just pop during the day along River Drive. Again, people should be focusing on driving. Yes, I get that, but it's nice to look off, especially when you see that large of a building for a block. And these murals accomplish that. So
so we vote on,
Are we, okay. All in favor?
aye?
So that project, as well as item C, the Freight House deck replacement project, which is very exciting as well, were both approved by the Design Review Board last night. It just worked out that way from a calendar standpoint, and rather than waiting a whole nother month to have you all see it first, knowing that we know about the deck project. And so in your packet, you see what the rendering of what is contemplated for this. This still needs to be let for bids. We're going to kind of keep moving on this and hope for a delayed winter, but if not, it's likely to be a project that's finished in the spring. Certainly, I've been pretty clear, because I've kind of wanted it this fall yet, but I've been pretty clear that we want this done by the start of at the very least, the start of the market next May 1st, essentially. Okay. So if we are able to get all of this bid, and the bids come back, decent and all of that, we may get a start on some of this. But if not, it will come out of the winter, and we'll get busy. Again, you'll note that we're going to have to do this in somewhat of a phased approach, because we are not closing any of the businesses. We've worked out a plan already to ensure different access points while we're working in certain areas. But I'm sharing this with them, and many are very excited. This is the wood's being replaced with a composite. So that was one of the items that the council spoke at length about when they provided the funding for this project, and wanting it to be long-lasting. This deck is probably 25 plus years old, the main part of it, the main level. And I think you'll see with the composite, and then also this, I call it like a nautical galvanized cabling. I think you're going to see, I think there's going to be, it's going to pop. It's going to look really nice. And the extra touch, I think, that kind of puts it over the top is this idea of some string of lighting across the entirety of this. I think that will make the deck itself for each of the tenants in the building pop. And that is a low dollar amount. It's not contemplated currently in the bid packet because of funding issues, but I think that's something we can undertake. We're talking about lights that we pick up at the local store and string them across. We've got the electrical already there. We just connect these like we're putting up, holiday lights or something. So I think that piece of it was well received as well. It looks very nice.
Discussion here.
Yes.
So, Bill, you want to go first?
Steve, I know you're aware when we had the diner upstairs and we had to get access to them, we put an elevator in, and then together we tried to find a way to get access to the elevator. And the same people that approved this denied us the sloped walkway going through the wall and right to the elevator because it was a different railing. And now they're building all the railing different. And is there any logic to going back and making the access clearer for people going to the diner to go up a slope and to the elevator?
Not currently.
Is it Gwen?
I was wondering, is the horizontal cabling allowed by code for this kind of application?
Believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
It hasn't been submitted for permitting yet.
Okay.
But design review, it's being vetted
Okay.
and has been vetted by some.
Okay.
So that would be a bit of a surprise if it's not at this point.
Okay.
So
Did we hear that question, all of us, or I don't know?
she was asking about the
The horizontal cabling on the commercial.
if it's permissible.
If it was allowed by code, because that kind of varies from.
All, right. All I heard on that was it needed to be like 2 inches instead of
4
like
inches,
4 or
and it
something
is
like
allowed.
that. So that's why you see a few more rows than what was originally contemplated.
I'm just looking at, and you mentioned it, Steve. I agree that the lighting, I think, would really be a real nice touch, and you mentioned that it's a fairly low cost item, so it just seems like, well, why wouldn't we throw that in?
Yeah, that's the plan. I just wanted to note that in here on one of these renderings it says not in the contract, but that's why it says that, because it wasn't. It's sort of a very recent add-on. So we'll throw it in and see how things come back. But
So you envision that probably will be included without us as a commission having to pay for that? Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Good. Because I think that's a nice touch as well.
I went down and kind of took a serious look, and I spoke with you briefly. When this deck comes off, I don't know why, but they painted all the thresholds, and all that is peeling and chipping, and it actually doesn't look that good. So I was wondering if we could test the idea of pressure washing that off and just go back to the limestone thresholds that were there. I don't think the gray has any any significance in terms of accessibility or anything. So, and then the front could actually use a pressure wash on that side.
That's right.
And what a better time to do it when you're taking down some deck, but depending on the time of the year. So could someone really look at that? Because otherwise, we're doing a lot for the deck, and there's just minor things that could lower our maintenance and actually make the project look better in the end. Do you need something from us? We're just going to see the bids are going to go to council.
Correct.
All right, so you'll just let us know who the bidder is and how successful we were.
Yep.
All right.
There's also an element to this project that you might recall at the west end where the farmer's market basically is located, where we have a ramp essentially to that Florine Keene, and we're going to widen it. It's needed. We're just going to add twice as much space there because you basically have to wait. You can't really have two people go down at the same time. So that's kind of separate but related to this project.
Given that we only have two members of the public here, is it possible at all to ask a question or two? Could I ask a question or two? Okay. As long as it's not in my 5 minutes, okay.
Or after the meeting, Steve could answer.
Okay. And I think the dog leg ramp really needs to be taken out and just at the end, continue it, the width of the sidewalk.
Yeah.
It's unnecessary. It just was in there from who knows what.
So item D under projects, Union Station interior and exterior projects is more of an update briefly tonight, and that is we have bid the exterior work, and we're working with a firm, not quite ready to announce that firm, but we're working with them on a professional services contract that we'll return to you all with, insofar as not so much the contract approval, because I think it'll be over a certain amount. Council will review it, but to at least keep you knowledgeable of how we're moving forward and how we're fortifying and restoring the exterior part of Union Station. As for inside, sort of late breaking, the bids were due yesterday. We received 2, and because FEMA is involved, the word we received today is that we have to have 3, even though we had a couple open houses. We sent it out to, I think, over 700 contractor subs and generals. I don't know if we're going to get that third one, but I'm not pleased because it's going to delay even further, and it may affect the Visit Quad Cities agreement we just approved here, because it may push that time frame where they can come in back a little bit. So I did not see that coming. So we received 2. We need to basically reject those and go back out to bid, which takes, we're talking a few more weeks, maybe 6 by the time this is all said and done before we can even contemplate getting started. And so a little disappointed on that front, but those are the rules as they're being indicated to us. So wanted to give you those developments through today.
Are those bids public then for those 2 contractors?
Not yet.
When you reject them, do they
Reject
become
them.
public?
I don't know. There's a meeting first thing in the morning about that, because that would seem to be wrong.
They didn't open them.
Finance, purchasing knows, I just don't, that particular rule on that. Yeah, sorry? Purchasing has them. They're not public, that's correct. And then, are there any questions related to item D? Item E under projects. Sorry.
The exterior project and that consultant, when will that go to the city council, do you think? And
Well, I just received a draft today, and so
Right.
that needs some discussion first before it's decided when. to place it on the agenda.
So probably in September, though.
Probably the second cycle at this point in September, yes. And that too is important, as we all know, because we've got a current, area that is kind of bound by some barricades, and it's very close to the entrance of a tenant of ours, and Taste of Ethiopia. And so they're operating. There's enough room, but it's imperfect. And so I've been, they've been very patient, and I've been working with them to say help is on the way as far as we're going to get this addressed. But, I'm just hoping for a much later winter so that we don't run out of time here.
Well, could a mitigation point be that you pull up the bricks and put some temporary asphalt in?
We may, depending how fast we can do it, we may have to plan B it a little bit, yes. Because snow removal doesn't make it any easier in that area. What we have going on, that's going to become a headache, and we're in charge of that. So, anything else on D? Item E, in your packet, I've included the minutes stemming from the last joint work group task force on August 13th relative to the Canadian Pacific Railroad crossings. I can read through each of these 8 items, but I'm sure since they're in the packet, you all have had the opportunity to do that. I think we're progressing. D, I don't know, or Bill, if you have anything to add, but in many cases, not all, but in many cases, the decisions from the group is to move to the 50% design plans from the 30, and you'll see that noted on a number of these items. So those we get staff receives and sees at various intervals. So it doesn't mean you go from 30 to final. It means the next iteration of design plans to make sure that there's consistency to what is being decided. So I would say the biggest decision point at this juncture relates to Gaines Street. That was a topical discussion among those assembled on August 13th. Was how do we handle Gaines Street? There have been, you may remember that we've talked about the possible introduction of vehicular cross section, if you will, at Warren, and to have Gaines remain, or not remain, but to be introduced as pedestrian because of a lot of the mitigation, the flood protection. And how it doesn't connect very well under existing circumstances or the new reality. I think Zach is working on another concept, but it remains to be seen about its viability. Nothing against his abilities, but about the viability, because what you're talking about with the introduction of Warren Street is CP's on the hook for a number of things, but not the introduction of a complete street, according to them. Okay, and so you're talking about, it was reported at the meetings, over $1.2 million possibly of city expenditure, possibly. Okay, I want to reference it in this way for that scenario to take place, and so I think another scenario is being thought about. What that is, I don't know, but I think it's being worked on at this point.
Are these design plans initiated by the city or Canadian Pacific?
Canadian Pacific, reviewed by the city. Canadian Pacific has a firm called HDR that they have working on, I think, multiple locations, this HDR firm throughout the country, and many, almost like a crossing is being farmed out to various locations. So it's not even all of the crossings aren't being done in one particular location in order for this to continue to advance, expeditiously. That being said, I think we're definitely at this point looking at a springtime fix. And I do want to say, because I have this conversation quite a bit with people, and you all may too, the crossings that are there now are temporary too. I have this probably 3 times a day, this conversation. I think many people think that the ones that were placed in there this summer, Harrison, Gaines, Marquette, that they're permanent and the other ones are being worked on. They're not. Nothing is permanent yet. The idea is, and I think it was a good one, but to be able to gain access to any of these riverfront locations, you've got makes no sense to do all of them and then redo all of them, but as long as you have points of entry into the certain sections of the riverfront, then you can begin in the areas that, while leaving these open, the ones that aren't touched with the permanent solutions, you complete those and then you move towards the temporary ones, changing them, converting them over to the permanent ones. That's the idea. But I just end up conveying that so often that I thought it was important to convey this evening as well.
So I just wanted to report out that we updated the city council on the crossings at last week's management update, with the exception of the Gain Street crossing, and the city council did not object to any of the designs that we had the task force group had asked to move forward to 30% drawings. So they were all in agreement with what the task force had come up with so far, and we'll continue to work on getting something that we can appreciate at Gain Street.
Bill?
Kyle, I'd like somebody to have the railroad explain why they put riprap on both sides of the ballast section. The land side is not ever going to have any waves, so it doesn't make any sense to me what they're doing.
Looks good.
Yeah,
I thought
It looks good now, but it won't look good with time.
I thought they were just trying to what they said was they were just trying to reinforce the existing.
Yeah, I don't think it was an aesthetic from their perspective. It was fortifying the lines, but I think it's a huge improvement, to be honest with you. The limestone.
That's what they told us.
All right.
Well, with that,
It's a staff report now.
yeah, good. While I'm up here, I was just going to say I just have one item, and I sent it out through email, but it's very exciting. I don't want it to get lost. You'll hear about it multiple times, but we were successful in obtaining a federal grant, a ferry boat grant, for the replacement of the dock at Lindsay Park. And so this is in conjunction, City of Davenport, with MetroLink, $1.2 million. It's an 80-20 cost share, local cost share, and so it's pretty exciting. And just, I think, in an important time frame because it too is about 24, 25 years old, and so it will probably be 2 seasons before because there's some things that have to be done environmentally and otherwise in order for us to fulfill the grant obligation. So it's not just a matter of opening by next season. But so it's going to take a bit, but I think that it's a great win for us. So that's all I have right now.
Has the yacht club done their work?
I missed the first
The
part.
Lindsay
Yeah.
Boat Club, have they done their work?
Yep.
or-
With the dredging.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
were the same people we talked to earlier in the earlier meeting, maybe the same ones we'd like to talk to about a long-term, a feasibility study for that?
Already made a note.
All right, perfect. Good,
Yep.
good.
Yeah. Yep. Dan. Yep. He was about for something else, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Steve?
Yes.
So are we coordinating with Lindsay Boat Club on the new project on the 1.2? I know they wanted to be kind of involved in it.
Yeah. If it works, like we said earlier, because that was written and submitted beforehand, and so I don't know if we can add to in all honesty, I don't know if we're going to be able to add to it, but if there are ways, since they share a boundary, if there are ways to connect some dots here, absolutely. Yep. Is that all? Okay, thank you. Richard?
Richard?
We've been here a while, so I'll keep it short. I think the main thing you might be interested in is Credit Island Lodge, talked to Betsy today, and bids for cleaning that lodge are due Thursday. So if the bids come in Thursday, who knows? It's going to be a little bit before that gets done. Excuse me. That's probably the most important thing. September 5th at 5 o'clock, we're going to have the grand opening of the Miracle Field. I think you're all aware of the Miracle. I know Bill Churchill's aware of it. So that'll be quite an event for us. They said the LeClaire Park sod came back pretty well, and the Parks Department managed to save us some money by doing it themselves. And the only other thing is the new obstacle course at Sunderbrook. I don't know. I think we're so I'm a little past that time of my life to be on that obstacle course, but we put it out there because the clientele at Sunderbrook with the off-road biking, and they're pretty active. And from what we've heard, it's used quite a bit. So those are probably the main things, unless you have some questions. Go ahead, Bill.
So city crews can't do the cleaning of?
No.
No?
Because it's a FEMA project, and they have to have, I forget all the regulations. I don't know if
Wow.
Steve knows or not, but
What I
cleaning the lodge, it's a FEMA contract, so city crews can't do it.
what I do know is it's extensive. It is extensive.
It's repair. It's not just cleanup,
This,
right?
yeah, this
There's
is
repair,
it's cleanup and
electrical,
repair,
it's-
and it is.
Yeah, it's
It would require. There would be very little else to be able, from a labor standpoint, being done for an extensive amount of time.
Yeah, and they have to be sure about the mold in the building when they're finished, and be sure they get rid of all the mold.
Bill, it's not dissimilar from what we did with Union Station. We had to have a professional firm come in and certify it.
So it doesn't have like drywall in it though, does it?
No,
Yeah, I'm not familiar,
no.
but it is.
Which Union Station did, didn't it?
Yeah, but that wasn't the sole reason that we
No.
brought in others. I mean,
I think it's got.
But
clay
so
block.
does that flow through thing that they installed, is that meeting expectations
Yeah.
or is that not working?
Yeah, we were down there. Mike, you were down there. What is there, 3 or 4 inches of mud in the floor?
yeah. So,
Probably.
so
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I mean,
and it didn't break any windows, thank goodness. None of those architecturally correct windows. They put plywood over them to keep logs from breaking into them. But I think the main thing is just the what's the environmental hazard with mold and mildew and things. And no power, unless they've got it up by now. But I think part of the contract said they had to supply their own generators, because right now there's no power to the island. So I don't know when that'll be fixed. I also want to introduce Mike Schertz. He's going to take over the liaison. We rotate the liaison every year or so. So Mike's going to do it for the next year. So any other questions?
Thank you for your time, Richard. Thank you for.
All right,
Yep.
Bill.
My 5 minutes, I'd like to beg your indulgence for 2 minutes to talk about the issue on the west side of the freight house decking. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Oh, well. Oh, is it? Okay, sorry. The thing that I wanted to talk about, because I thought this was something that then was mentioning, that they're working on it, that it would be resolved, but it sounds like it's not being resolved probably in the best manner. And here's my own, is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. And how I think you might want to look at before you actually approve the plan. On the west end of the sidewalk, as you know, the west end of the extreme west end of the sidewalk, you know, the canopy is right there. We have this ramp creating a dog leg that everyone has to put themselves through, and it sounds to me like the solution was to widen. You have a wider dog leg. Well, it seems to me the easiest thing to do is just get rid of the dog leg entirely, and at the west end of the sidewalk, at the handicap ramp. Yeah, it has a. So at the end of the freight house, if this is the canopy at the freight house, the sidewalk ends, 10-foot wide sidewalk ends is landscaping, and then the handicap ramp comes around there, and people are forced. It's a terrible bottleneck. People are going up here making a turn, and it's very ungainly and not at all conducive to pleasant experience. So what I would, rather than widening that ramp, I would suggest chopping off this 10-foot wide sidewalk and having the sidewalk just as wide as the ramp and dispensing entirely with this ramp, so people can go straight up it without the dog leg. It seems to me that's an obvious solution, and if it hasn't been looked at, it needs to be, I think. So that's my, at $150 an hour, that's $5 that you owed me, okay? So now I'm gonna give you my, the other thing was, and I mentioned before, I think it would be good to have a decking underneath the second floor patio on the east end of the freight house. Right now, when you're walking, if a visitor comes down River Drive and walks around, they see this huge pile of unkempt dirt, and there might be a few weeds growing up there, volunteer garden. Seems like it. I've got an idea, and I can show you. I'll send you a sketch, Steve, on how I think it might be a positive thing. Maybe that's something you could add to your bid documents for the deck replacement. Also, I want to make sure if you got an architect working with you on that, make sure they've checked the span tables, because if you replace wood decking with composite decking is much weaker than wood, and opening day people will be walking up, they'll be bouncing around.
Bill,
on the composite.
there's an architect on the.
I didn't know. Okay. One of the things that, going back, this is my 5 minutes on the riverfront. I think there are many good things about the RDG design. It's just that to some extent, I think they need to be edited for a proper resolution. One, and I think it's the most important one, is the disregard of the historic nature of our riverfront. The riverfront from the levee end all the way to the ballpark. Does anyone know? Is it on the National Register of Historic Places? If it isn't, it needs to be. And if it is, if it isn't, it needs to be. And with that being on the register, I don't think that this continuation, actually chopping off 30% of this park with this ramp going down from Harrison Street, is something we should do. And I don't think we should remove nearly 400 feet of beautiful limestone seawall that was put in by Bill Peterson, the designer of the park, along with Clausen. And I have to say, I've got to extend a thanks to the railroad for putting that riprap. Bill, you were saying the reason you didn't like it was because of what? Oh, well, I guess because of the wave action or something. But it's limestone riprap, about like bigger than a fist, maybe 2 fists or so. What they've done is they've actually given us a preview of what RDG's design is between the edge of the pedestrian area to the river, because essentially what they're showing is originally we had the inclined brick area from that was our landing for our riverboats, a brick incline that was historic and was dispensive in the 50s when our Chamber of Commerce, I guess the predecessor of the Davenport Partnership, decided to put a parking lot all the way across here. What they're now showing, whereas before when you had this concrete seawall here, you could walk up to the river and the river would be within about 7 or 8 feet of your footsteps. But what they're going to be doing is demolishing that, also demolishing this beautiful limestone seawall right here, and essentially adding an incline of riprap. And the sidewalk is going to be 50 to 80 feet away from the edge of the river. And it'll be as if we had a riprap seawall like Rock Island has, with none of the benefits. You won't be able to get, if you want to go to the riverfront, you won't be able to do it because of all the riprap RDG is showing here. That I think is entirely foreign to a good design solution, and I think we ought to reject it. Thanks.
One down.
Yeah. I got a lot to learn. This is why you do 2 years.